I was navigating the web for I don't remember what research project when I fell into a Google rabbit hole and found this picture of the composer Luciano Berio holding a puppet of the poet Edoardo Sanguinetti. I was aware of their many collaborations. I knew they had developed a personal and artistic bond over the years. Still, Berio having a puppet of Sanguinetti seemed like a very strange quirk. René Descartes was said to have a mechanical automaton of his deceased daughter. Oskar Kokoschka commissioned a doll of his ex-lover, but why did Berio have a Sanguinetti puppet? This is when I discovered the artistry of the American puppeteer Amy Luckenbach. It is precisely of her work that I want to talk, and of her collaboration between 1995 and 1997 with Berio for two compositions, A-ronne and Novissimum Testamentum, for which Luckenbach created the puppet of Sanguinetti. First off, who is Amy Luckenbach? A doll maker turned puppeteer from Illinois who lived all her adult life in the hills outside of Florence in Colle Ramole. Her first production was a puppet theater version of Maurice Sendak Where the Wild Things Are, presented in many Florentine squares in 1976. This was the first of a long series of children production on which she worked until her death in 2009. But how did Luckenbach move from children's puppet theater to collaborating with Berio and Sanguinetti? In 1993, Berio's wife, Talia Pecker Berio, attended one of Luckenbach's puppet show in Florence. She was so impressed by her artistry that she decided to invite Luckenbach over for dinner to introduce her to her husband. At that time, Luckenbach was working on a puppet show based on a rewriting of Snow White by Emanuele Luzzati, and she was hoping to get Berio on board to write the music. Berio instead offered her to collaborate to the mise-en-scène of A-ronne, a composition he had written in 1974 based on a text by Edoardo Sanguinetti. A-ronne is a tape composition for 5 voice actors who interpret Sanguinetti's poem, which is a sort of collage of different texts, the Divine Comedy, the Communist Manifesto, the Bible, and more. Berio during that dinner played A-ronne for Luckenbach. She was not enticed by it and declined the collaboration. Berio reacted by telling her it was time for her to leave children fairy tales behind. Luckenbach put the tape cassette of A-ronne in her pocket, convinced otherwise. However, after a few months, Luckenbach went back on her decision. She listened to the recording again and immersed herself in the flux of words and sounds, to the point that Luckenbach's husband remembers Berio's composition echoing in their house for months, while she worked at some tentative sketches for A-ronne's puppets. Then, about a year from the first dinner, Luckenbach met Berio again to show him her sketches, which the composer received with great enthusiasm. And in July 1995, A-ronne premiered in Siena at the Settimana Musicale Chigiana. For A-ronne, Luckenbach created a set of 12 puppets, all naked or almost naked, with their genitals on display, as she wanted them to be as bared and crude as Berio's composition. The puppets give a body to the many voices of the libretto. Each puppet represents an archetypical character. There is the meek man wrapped in blue ribbons, the dictator in red, and in red is also the seductive woman. There is Aleph woman with the Hebrew alphabet painted on her body, the juggler of secrets and meanings, the opera singer, the acrobat, and more. They are primordial and eerie creatures belonging to the same nightmarish vision evoked by the actors' voices. Furthermore, much like Sanguinetti's poem is at the same time a collage of other authors' texts and yet a very personal statement, so Luckenbach's puppets represent at the same time universal archetypes and her personal oniric fantasies. In 1997, 2 years after A-ronne, Berio and Luckenbach brought on stage a second production performed in conjunction with A-ronne. It was Novissimum Testamentum, based on a poem by Sanguinetti that he wrote in 1982. In the text, Sanguinetti directly appeals to his readers and paints a satirical self-portrait while he mockingly pretends to bid farewell to the world of letters. In 1982, Sanguinetti was only 52. For Novissimum Testamentum, as it is a monologue, Luckenbach creates just one puppet, the one of Sanguinetti that we saw in the first picture. The puppet represents an old, frail, naked man speaking from his deathbed, and indeed its pose reminds of the iconography of the deposition. Transforming the poet into a puppet reinforces on a visual level what the text expresses verbally, the performative and clownesque process of self-creation. In Novissimum Testamentum, Sanguinetti gives us a satirical but also dramatic self-portrait, a self-portrait that is far from honest and instead highly fictional and parodical. Appropriately, on stage, this self-portrait is voiced by a puppet, a clumsy and grotesque surrogate. Sanguinetti's drained and overperformed ego is turned into a stuffed doll. In A-ronne and Novissimum Testamentum, Luckenbach's talent harmonized with and expanded on Berio's and Sanguinetti's previous collaboration. This is why her presence is so strong in that picture of Berio holding the puppet of Sanguinetti, even if we cannot immediately see her.